Do you have a teenager who may be unsure about what they want to do for the rest of their life? You ask them,
"Are you going to go to college? What degree are you going to get? What do you think you would like to do?"
And they really just aren't sure. I've thought about this a lot. Should we be pushing them into college if they are unsure? How do you guide them, right? At some point, they do have to choose a career. They have to be responsible adults. So how can we as mom help them? Recently, I was in my salon and I overheard the owner's daughter talking about how she had one more semester at school. She was going to college and getting an entrepreneurship degree, but she was telling all of these women sitting at the front desk, but she had no idea what she wanted to do with it. She had no idea where to apply for jobs. I feel like this is all too common. Kids going to college, getting degrees, and then saying,
"Now what?"
In this video, I'm going to take you on a journey, the journey of me helping my son figure out what he's going to do for the rest of his life. Observations I've made, things we tried, and when those things didn't work, what did we do next? I'm so excited to tell you where this all led us, because it led us to a place that I didn't even know existed, honestly. But before I get into that, we need to go back into the past. I have a bit of story time because you probably can relate to this, especially if you were educated in a public school or in a modern school system. We have been programmed to think a certain way about education, and I feel like I have had to slowly dismantle everything that I've been taught so that I can help my children not make the same mistakes that I did. So let's start from the beginning. First of all, my name is Rachel. I am a homeschooling mom to 3 kiddos, age 17, 14, and now 11. My youngest just turned 11. I have been at this homeschool game for 10 years now. And my channel is all about motherhood and homeschooling and faith. So the young lady that I overheard talking in the salon about getting her degree and not knowing what she wanted to do with it, that was me. Who else? Tell me in the comments. Who else got your college degree and then said, now what? Now, I actually, when I went to college, this is how it was for me, and this is what I would like to avoid for my children. I went to college thinking, I'm going to be a teacher. That's what I wanted to do. I was good in school. I loved school, and I was exposed to teachers, and I thought I could do that. But after my first year in college, we did what was called a field experience, and that was where you spent a few days in the classroom. That's where I realized,
I don't have the energy for this. The irony, right?
I didn't have the energy anyway to teach other people's children, and I just decided right then, when I was 19 years old, I'm not cut out for teaching. But then I was at a crossroads because this was the deal that I struck with my parents. This was the deal they had for my older brothers. My parents were going to help me pay for college. They would pay for half of whatever I didn't get in scholarships, but they were only going to help for 4 years. So now I've spent a year in college thinking I was going to be a teacher, and now I felt like so much pressure. I've got to figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And for the past 3 to 4 years, I thought I was going to be a teacher. I haven't thought about anything else. I never had anybody really guiding me into,
well, what are your interests, Rachel? What are your strengths?
I mean, I had strengths like math, okay? So I did have people telling me you would be good at this, which is why I ended up getting the degree that I got. I got a degree in management information systems because I was good at math, because my brother told me you should work at this company that he's working at that had a lot of jobs in IT. And so for job security purposes, that's what I did. I changed my major to MIS, and I started doing computer programming classes. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't like it, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. I had to graduate in 3 years. And I even asked my mom at some point, can I get a double major? Because I was thinking about doing some sort of other business degree. And she told me again, we're only helping you for 4 years. I was already working in school just to pay for my part of the tuition. I wasn't even eligible really for that many for student aid or student loans because my dad made too much money and my older brothers were already adults. So I was technically like an only child. So I already was barely paying for my part of the tuition. There was no way I could pay for a whole year on my own. So I got my degree, I got a job, and I dreaded going to work every day. This is absolutely not what I want for my children. And I look back on all of that and just think, I wish somebody would have helped me think through this. I wish that somebody would have suggested that I take a gap year. Some people might take a gap year after high school until they figure out what they're going to do. What's the point of going to college if you don't know what you're going to do? I thought I was going to be a teacher, but I could have taken a gap year once I decided that wasn't for me and really explored what I was interested in. But nobody really suggested that to me. I was on my own. I, and even my own family, we are the result of the modern education system. I'm not going to get into what compulsory education teaches in this video, but I recently just read the book Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto. And wow. That book is not very big. I totally recommend it for any homeschool mom. Actually, I recommend it for any parent, even if you have kids in the public education system, because John Taylor Gatto was like Teacher of the Year. He was praised for his teaching, and yet he wrote a book. He wrote multiple books, actually, about how flawed the education system is, and this will just turn your thinking upside down. I found myself the whole time reading this book, like nodding my head, yep, that's how it is, because I could see myself as a product of this education system, which essentially teaches you to obey. It's not really teaching you to critically think. It's teaching you to just do what you're told. And because of this, when it was time for me to think about what I want to do with the rest of my life, what I might be good at, and all of that, I had no clue. I hadn't thought for myself practically ever. Like even in high school, it was, you're doing college prep classes. That's what you're doing. And then when you go to college, you've chosen your career path and you're doing it. And now when you have to make a choice and you feel all this pressure, like I seriously did not know. My family didn't quite understand just how much I was struggling. I mean, this is how much I was struggling. I'm good at math. That's why I chose the career that I chose. But it's not like just because I'm good at math doesn't mean I want to be an accountant, doesn't mean I want to be an actuary. It doesn't mean I want to do computer coding. When I think back on my college, especially when I was getting a teacher's degree, my favorite class was art. It was my favorite class to go to. The things I actually enjoyed are not the logic stuff. It's the creative. It's the right-brained things. And although my family knew I was creative, they kind of always steered me towards the left-brain things. The current system has bred us to rely on the teacher telling us what to do next. But then one day, real life happens, and you have to start making decisions on your own. And maybe the things that you thought you were going to do aren't going to happen. So what do you do next? The fact that my kids are homeschooled, they're already leaps and bounds ahead where I was, because I have never told them what to do next. I've never preached to them,
You have to go to college.
when I was growing up, that was like, you didn't think of anything else. If you were going to be successful or have a career, you had to go to college. That is not the case anymore, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But I have never told my kids, you have to do this or you have to do that. I'm not having my son take ridiculous amounts of hours in high school. I'm not forcing him to do dual credit because I want him to be ahead, because he doesn't know what he wants to do. I am taking it one day at a time with him. I'm trying to give them room to explore their own interests. I'm trying to have an open mind myself. I'm paying attention to what actually makes him tick, what he likes to spend his time on. And I am thinking, how could that translate into a career that maybe I could suggest for him, or maybe into some sort of class that we could explore and see if that triggers anything. I'm trying to follow my children's lead rather than me trying to lead them in a certain direction that may not be for them. So what does this look like from an early age? I'm just going to use my son as an example because that's the best example I have. He's 17. He's pretty much my main experiment, right? But from an early age, I observed he loved Legos. Like, he could take the largest Lego set, for example, the police station. I can't think of how many pieces it had, but it's a pretty big set. And when he was 7 or 8 years old, he would lock himself in his room and he would work on that new Lego set that he had until it was done. And he got it done like that. I remember that police station only took him 2 days, which blows my mind because I was never the kind of child that wanted to sit there and follow directions. I wanted to create it in my own way. In fact, I'm still like that. Give me something new that comes with an owner's manual. I'm going to try to figure it out without looking at the owner's manual first, because I don't want to follow somebody else's directions. That's just how I am. But my child was not like that. He liked having the list that says do this, do this, do this, and he's very diligent about until it gets done. And then at some point, he liked Rubik's Cubes. I told him, he found one of my old Rubik's Cubes. And he goes, how does this work? And I said,
Nobody knows how to solve it. It's like, I've never solved it. I don't even know why it's in this house.
And he went online and found YouTube videos and learned how to solve it. And not only did he learn how to solve it, but he started looking at more YouTube videos, and he had a list of the algorithms that you can learn to solve Rubik's Cubes. I mean, he got down to being able to solve it in under 30 seconds. Once you get under 30 seconds, it becomes a lot more difficult to take time off of, to speed up, to get under 30 seconds. But the fact that he could solve it at 30 seconds anyway, again, blows my mind. This kid is wired very differently from me. We did a co-op once, I think he was 5th grade, and we signed up for this fun co-op. And one of the class options they had was Scratch programming. He wanted to do that class. It was his favorite class. Scratch programming is, I think it's free online. It probably has an app too, but it kind of introduces kids to computer programming, and it has fun graphics, and even my daughters have played around with it. So it's a fun little way to think about computer programming. He loved that class. So all along I'm thinking, what could this translate to? How is my child wired? What kind of career might he be interested in? So we did a bunch of STEM classes at the library regarding his interest in Rubik's Cubes. We got him all kinds of different cubes, like they have pyramid cubes. They have the original Rubik's Cube is a 3x3x3 cube, but they also have a 2x2. They also have 4x4x4. I mean, he wanted to experiment with all of those because he was kind of nerdy when it came to the Rubik's Cubes. We signed him up for Rubik's Cubes competitions because when we were a part of Classical Conversations many, many years ago, there were a lot of boys in our community who were into the Rubik's Cubes. And so they would literally sit around at lunch and just do the cube. And we found out there was a competition. So that was fun. And, got him a little timer so he was constantly practicing at home. We signed him up for 4-H. 4-H isn't just about farming. They had a robotics club that we did for a couple of years. And while even he was in the robotics club, there were more general 4-H group meetings that he went to where he was exposed to other things. Like I remember him going and doing an art project. So 4-H was really good for that, and even just going to the fair because you get to walk around and see all of the other clubs that exist. But he really enjoyed the robotics, which was programming the EV3 robot at that time. Even my daughter at that time, I think she was 10 years old maybe, she joined a 4-H sewing club and she learned how to sew. So she was also part of those generic meetings. And in those generic meetings, a lot of time the group leader will bring in experts in various areas. I think we had somebody come talk to us about bees, carpenter bees specifically, and their effect on the environment and how you could help foster their little hive in your own backyard, because we have a need for all kinds of different bees. And so they're just exposed to all kinds of things. 4-H also gives you leadership possibilities as the kids get older. They have presidents of their club, vice presidents, treasurers. My nieces and nephews all had positions in their club that when they did go to college, or when they were looking at college, they were able to put that on their resume as leadership opportunities. So my son was doing the robotics club. When you're a part of 4-H, one of the things they encourage you to do is figure out some sort of project to take to your county fair. So my son was in robotics. He took a robotics project, which was essentially, he had certain things that he had to program this robot to do, and they got judged on whether or not they did it, how well the robot executed whatever it was they programmed, and probably also some creativity that they incorporated. So the robot was literally on this floor that had kind of a map on it, and it was performing the different things that it was supposed to perform. My son went to state in robotics, so then he went to the state fair and saw even more robotics projects, even more exposed to more things. Even with all that success in robotics, though, here's what it uncovered. My son did it, and he discovered he has no interest in coding. He enjoyed it while it lasted, but he didn't want to do it again. So we were back to the drawing board. I thought all this time, I was like, he's going to be a software engineer. Clearly, he has an engineering mind, like building. He has a knack for some logic and for some systematic thinking. He also is he's very detail oriented. So that's why the Lego instructions work for him. He didn't make mistakes on his instructions. Whereas like when my second child, she got Lego Elsa Castle or something, my son had to help her finish it because she got lost in the instructions. She got bored with it. So my son came in and built that for her. That's just how he thinks, but he didn't like coding. So I'm like, what is he going to do? How are we going to guide him? His love of building Legos actually did show up again just a couple years ago in the form of my son building his own computer. All of a sudden one day, packages began showing up at our house. He had saved up his hard-earned mowing money to buy computer parts that he intended to use to build his own computer. I didn't know what he was doing. These parts just showed up. My husband knew a little that he wanted to do this, but neither of us had any knowledge about building computers. We're more business people. Then he took an afternoon and built his computer for himself. He did the research to figure out what parts he needed. He wanted this computer for an enhanced gaming experience because he does like to play video games, but he also likes this dual screen situation for his schoolwork. So he needed more power, better video graphics, and then of course, when you build a computer this powerful, how many fans do you need so that it doesn't overheat? He figured all this out for himself. This mama was proud. My older nephew, who's also a tech guy, came over to see it and told me, "This looks like the desk of a software engineer." I said, "Really?" And then here's the other thing. So he didn't like coding, and he also doesn't like math. He was a conundrum for a long time. How am I going to guide him? I was constantly thinking, is he going to go to college? Maybe he's not. I wanted to start exposing him to all kinds of different things just to see what piqued his interest. And here's the thing about college too. It is not the same as it was 30 years ago. The world is not the same as it was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, you kind of needed a college degree in order to get a job. That is not the case anymore. There are so many uneducated kids coming out of college, and employers know this now. When I came out of college and I did finally get a job in this pretty large corporation, they trained me for what they needed me to do. What I learned in college actually didn't really prepare me that much. It did maybe a smidge, because I did understand some things about coding and computers that they didn't have to teach me. But for the most part, they taught me everything that I needed to know. College helped me very little. In fact, my husband and I joke around that when The Apprentice was big on TV, we watched every single Apprentice season from the very first season to when it started being the celebrities. But my husband and I would joke around that we learned more about business and running a business from watching that show than we did from college. I have a niece and nephew who both got hired at the same company that I worked for, and they both got hired for very technical jobs, and neither one of them has a college degree. Their job technically requires a college degree, though. So how did they get hired? My nephew was hired right out of high school for a job that required a college degree. My niece was hired her junior year in college for a job that required a college degree. They had the skills already. They learned how to code, and they got high school internships, which sometimes companies will offer to kind of help pique the interest of high schoolers to code and go to college to code and all that stuff. So they had high school internships, and they already had this coding skill. Where did they learn it from? The robotics club, actually. They were not just coding the EV3 robots, they had another robot that was requiring them to learn the Java language. Well, they got glowing reviews from their high school internships, and my nephew, I think, was one of the very first ones that they experimented with. He already excels at what we want him to do. Why does he need to go to college? So the company took a chance and hired him. So while all of his peers are going to college and accruing all this debt, he, at 18 years old, was hired and is making a lot of money. All because he learned the skill that was necessary for that job while he was in high school. Employers are starting to realize this. The kids that are going to college are not learning what the employers need them to learn. My niece didn't get hired right out of, she's actually older than my nephew, so she was in college. He got hired first, but she was hired about a year later, because even though she was going to college to get this degree that she was going to need to do her job at this company, she was also working summer internships for the company. And I think at one point while she was taking classes, she was also trying to work part-time. So she just kept her network and people that she knew, she just kept them in the loop. And eventually they said, we need her, and we don't need this degree. We already know she can do the job. So now you may hear this story and think, wow, I'm going to teach my kid how to do this coding because I want them to get hired right out of high school. It's not going to be the same path for everybody, but here's the thing that how I would describe what happened for my niece and nephew. They simply did the next thing. They didn't go into high school thinking this is going to be my career path. I'm definitely going to go work for this company, and I'm definitely going to be a computer programmer. They explored their interests, which led them to 4-H, which led them to robotics club, which led them to doing the more technical robot, which they had to learn this computer language for. They took advantage of the opportunities that were offered to high schoolers in the area that sometimes we may overlook because, well, if I take a summer internship, that means I can't play baseball, or I can't play softball, or I can't have a job at McDonald's. I can't have all this free time that a lot of high schoolers may want. They just did the next thing. And when a new opportunity presented itself, they explored it. And the Lord truly directed their steps. My nephew actually thought he was going to go to college for robotics engineering. He didn't want to work for this company. He really thought that he wanted to be a robotics engineer. At the time, there's only 3 colleges who even offer that degree. And he had his heart set. But then it came down to going to college for this or getting offered this job, which I don't know how much money his starting salary was. I'm not even going to guess because it doesn't matter except to say it's a lot of money for an 18-year-old. A year or so ago at the homeschool conference that we went to for our state, my husband attended this session that was kind of about this topic and whether or not college means what it used to mean. And they were talking about how careers are changing now. They were quoting statistics that are showing how college degrees actually mean less and less. They're worth less and less to a lot of employers. Companies don't need degrees. Companies need skills. And that's not what college is about anymore. Some degrees, yes. Like if you're going to be a lawyer, you need to study the law. You need to understand the ins and outs and debate and how to defend somebody, depending on what type of lawyer you are. If you're going to be a doctor, of course, you need college. But there are other things like this computer programming. Do you really need college to learn to code? No, you don't. There are so many things that you can learn even from YouTube. Do you need to go to college to learn how to do digital marketing? I mean, I'm doing this YouTube. I didn't go to college to learn how to do some of this stuff, but just from doing YouTube, I've learned some skills where if I wanted to help companies advertise online, I probably have a lot of skills that they would be looking for. It doesn't require a college degree. In this workshop that my husband was at the homeschool conference, they were talking about a lot of the careers that maybe even 20 years ago we would have considered as safe degrees, like computer programming, information type systems degrees. How is AI going to affect those? It used to be the technical careers were the thing to do. There were always going to be those jobs. And yet now we have AI. AI can cut out a lot of those jobs because AI can code. AI can do a lot of the things that computer programmers are doing. But can AI fix a toilet? This may shock a lot of people because there are some people, like I'm in this family where we were pretty much all college educated. And so we didn't give the trades much thought. And maybe the trades have never gotten as much respect 30 years ago compared to a college degree as they do today. The thinking is shifting now because college degrees are meaning less and less. And the skills of the trades are more and more in demand. We found this to be true in our own church, right? Like my parents and that generation, when we had things go wrong with our church, they knew how to fix it. My generation is all college educated and we're like, we need to hire somebody because we don't know how to fix that. There's a shift happening here. We have a friend who owns a business and that business needs welders. And he has told us for many, many years that there's a shortage of welders. They need welders. And do you know how much welders can make? Welders can make up to 6 figures. And they're not going to have college debt. 6 figures ain't bad, right? So maybe college, but we're open to the trades as well. Like what if my son is interested in something like that? But how is he going to know if he's interested in something like that? So what we've done is we have tried to expose him to some of these other trades. We had a friend who does tree cutting on the side. So my husband reached out to that friend and said, hey, can Drew come with you on a job some Saturday and just kind of job shadow or help you out in some way? And so he did that and he paid my son. And my son, he actually said he was a really good worker and he would hire him on all of his side jobs. So while my son was kind of learning about tree cutting, which is actually a very lucrative trade because it can be dangerous, it can be risky, right? You don't want huge trees to fall on people's homes. My son was learning about that, and also he had a side job that was it was a pretty good paying job. He was getting some physical exercise too, right? Because hauling branches is heavy. my husband began utilizing this app called Nextdoor app, which is somehow connects you to people locally to see what kind of odd jobs there may be. And he saw an ad in there, or a request from a single older woman who had a bunch of yard work she needed done. So he got my son a job doing the yard work. He got my son a job regularly mowing people's lawns. And we started to talk to my son, maybe you should start a lawn mowing business. Maybe you could start like lawn care maintenance business. We started throwing, my husband and I do have business degrees. So at this point, we're like, okay, we're finally going to use our degrees, and telling him how you could start your own business and how you could market it, and we'll help you with the accounting. And my son wasn't interested in starting his own business, but it was exciting to just think about exploring these ideas with him. What about carpentry? The man who he regularly mows yards for is a carpenter. And eventually this man, because he appreciated my son, would ask him to come to some of his jobs where he was installing cabinets, or he needed my son's muscle really to help him carry stuff into the house. But my son also helped him install cabinets and help him put together some of the jobs that he created. So now my son's been exposed to a little bit of carpentry. My dad used to be in construction, so he's done some jobs at our church, like involving siding or involving like building something at our church, where he will make sure to bring my son along so that he's exposed to this. My son actually, of all the trades that he's been exposed to, enjoyed putting up siding the most. Siding, house siding. He actually did kind of like that job. So are there other people in the trades that you could expose your child to? You can call it a job shadow. They don't have to pay them. But I've just felt like I just want to expose my son to all these things, because when I was his age, I just didn't give it a whole lot of thought. The only careers I was really exposed to was teachers, doctors, and then my dad was a vice president of a hospital. So business. I didn't really think of anything else. I wasn't thinking interior design, or I definitely wasn't thinking digital marketing or even that. I wasn't even thinking graphic design. That's really probably what I should have explored, graphic design, because it would have used my left brain and my right brain together maybe. Do you know of any job fairs, any college fairs, any sort of educational fairs where they're going to get like a little taste of all the different careers that are possible? There might be some sort of fair at your homeschool convention. I think our homeschool organization does run some sort of career fair for the homeschool students. It's amazing what they can learn in the networking possibilities that are there. Maybe it's not your children who are networking, but maybe it's you as parents. This is good for all of us to start making these connections so that when it's time to start guiding your children, you already have all these contacts lined up. And that brings me to what we recently discovered for my son, and it kind of gets into what we're doing this year for school. So I found out that in my area, and I don't know if other areas have anything like this, but we have a career center that is associated with one of the larger high schoolers in my area. And what that career center does is it holds very specialized classes, not your typical high school classes. So they have culinary classes, they have cosmetology classes, they have criminal justice classes, welding, construction. And so we went to this career fair, I think that's what it was called. And it was in the fall. So I'm just like, I didn't even know about this until this year, and I wish they would have. But we went in the fall, and you got to go from classroom to classroom and talk to whichever ones you were interested in anyway. My son wasn't interested in the culinary classes or the cosmetology classes, but he went to the ones that he was interested in, and you could ask the instructor questions. The instructor talked about what they did in the class. Here's the thing, and this is where I get into God. Because just like I said about my niece and nephew, they just did the next thing. They weren't planning out 5 years ahead. They just did the next opportunity that was given them. And that's all that I've ever done with my son. And I feel like this thing that I'm about to tell you is God. Because we can make our plans, but it is the Lord who will direct our steps. And it blows my mind to think, how did he even direct our steps here? I just on a whim heard about this career center and was like, I guess we should go to the open house. And when we went to the open house, one of the first classes that we went into was called Networking and Technology. And remember, my son doesn't like math and he doesn't like coding. So we went to this Networking and Technology class, and the instructor was talking about some of the projects they did, some of the field trips that they'll go to. So they'll go to local companies in our area that specialize in certain technologies. And he talked about one of the companies they went to that were making specific computer chips for a certain thing, for a government piece of technology. I know I feel like I am so ignorant when it comes to what it was they were talking about, plus the fact that this was months and months ago. But anyway, what he was talking about, like, I was like, that is so cool. Those are opportunities I could never give my child. This is so cool. And so my son was kind of interested. He went and explored the construction one because, you know, he had been exposed to siding and carpentry and tree cutting and all that. So we went to the class that was all about construction. We went to a criminal justice class because I also kind of wondered, investigator, right? He took the forensic science class this year. So forensic type investigator. He went to those classes and then he said, I want to go back to the networking and technology class and ask more questions. We were talking to the instructor, and one thing that he said that really made my son light up, the instructor said, I hate coding. And my son just lit up, and we looked at each other like, what? There are degrees and there are careers in technology that you can do that don't involve coding. Our minds were blown, and I started feeling like giddy. And then the instructor was explaining this class. It was a 3-year program, which is why I was bummed that I didn't hear about this, because next year my son is going to be a senior, right? And now we just found this, and it's a 3-year program. And it's worth college credit. So it's going to be every day at this school. I think our first years were 6 college credits, and here's the kicker. It's not going to cost us a thing because our local tax dollars, because our school district is a participating school in this career center. So our public school tax dollars pay for this. So my son next year is going to get 6 college credits for free. He's going to get to explore this technology class that doesn't involve coding, and he's going to get to expose to all kinds of things that he could do. He is so excited about this class that when we left the class, he goes, Mom, can I do this the next year too? Because it's a 3-year program, right? And I looked at him and I said, well, if I don't graduate you, you could. So we are exploring the possibility of him not graduating high school next year, but maybe being a 5th-year senior, or I don't know how we'll do it, because if he doesn't enjoy it, then I'll graduate him. He has enough credits. But I don't have to. That is so the beauty of homeschooling. I don't have to graduate him. And then he could take the 2nd year of this class, earn more college credit, because every single year has different college credits to it. They will translate to our community college. So when he does go, if he wants to go to community college, it's already all set up. My son was so excited. And my son is not an excitable kind of guy. He's pretty like straight-faced, pretty serious, except for when he does get silly. But for the most part, he's a pretty serious kind of guy, doesn't speak much. We were on our way home that night, and he was on his phone registering for that class because he wanted to make sure he got in, because they did say you need to register within the next week because the classes will fill up quickly. He registered himself on the way home. I have never anticipated that kind of enthusiasm for my son. So we are doing this next year. It's going to be a daily class for him. He will be driving a ways away to get to the class, but it's a 2-hour class every day, which is why it's going to be 6-hour college credits. So 5 days a week, 10 hours. The only other thing that we will be adding is language arts. I'm not even sure if I'm going to add math, because for college, you're not required, for admission anyway, you aren't required to have 4 years of math. So we'll see. I'm super pumped. But you guys, I would have never in a million years, 3 years ago, I had no idea that this opportunity even existed. I just paid attention to my child and kept searching for opportunities to expose him to new areas, to figure out who my child is and what he might do in the future. I still don't know if he might go to college. I'm not going to push him. And this is what I've told my friends, and what we've all agreed on too, is if your child graduates and they don't know what they want to do, why do they have to go to college? Why can't they take a step back, get a job somewhere, and figure out what their life is going to be? We make our plans, and the Lord directs our steps, and he knows way more into the future. Like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. but He does. And I want Him to perfectly guide us. I don't want to be trying to force my way on Him, force my plans on Him, even for my own children. I want His help in figuring out what it is that my child is supposed to do. Who is my child supposed to be in this world? And the one thing that I know for sure that my child is supposed to be is an ambassador for Christ. So that's my number one focus. And then from there, God, direct my steps. For more high school content, check out this playlist right here. YouTube thinks this video would be a good one for you. Till next time, bye.